Good day, and welcome to Ateneo Art Gallery's Art Speak Online. I'm Boots Herrera, the Museum Director and Chief Curator. Last April 19, we launched Pio Abad's exhibition titled Fear of Freedom Makes Us See Ghosts at the third floor galleries of Ateneo Art Gallery, which is still on view until July 30. The exhibit features select works from a series of projects which London-based artist Pia Abad began over 10 years ago. These are visual representations of how art and culture became both a vehicle of propaganda for the Marcoses, as well as their means of acquiring an excessive lifestyle using unexplained wealth. The set of postcards of European paintings and photographs and pen and ink drawings of expensive domestic objects are what Pio would describe as a visual catalogue of the Marcos loot, culled from various archival sources. A related work is a 3D set of a set of 3D print models of Imelda's jewelry, one of which is in my virtual background. So this is a product of a collaboration between Pio and his wife, renowned jewelry designer Frances Wadsworth Jones. To give more context to this project, please welcome Pio Abad. Pio?
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are. I'm really pleased to be introducing this particular talk today, which is part of the series of public events we're holding in relation to my exhibition at Ateneo, as Boots mentioned. And so, yeah, very happy to have Francis and Nice talking about the jewelry. I think, as many of you are probably aware, Francis has been a really important part of this project, first and foremost as, my wife and my partner for the past 16 years. She's really lived through the various, I guess, traumas, both political and personal, that shaped this project. And, it's a credit to her that this 10-year body of work has actually, been made possible through numerous conversations we've had, and, her advice and her, I guess, a sense of precision has shaped this project in so many ways. And in 2019, we actually, formalized this collaboration into body of work, which has become a really important component of the collection of Jane Ryan and William Saunders. As Boots referred to it, it's a series of 24 3D printed reconstructions of Imelda Marcos's jewelry, in particular, the so-called Hawaii collection. This is the hoard of jewels, tiaras, bracelets, necklaces, interestingly, not many rings, because I guess, those maybe she kept, that Imelda brought with her and her family when they fled from Malacanang Palace to Honolulu, where they were granted exile by Ronald Reagan in 1986. And so, over the past 3 decades, this work was smuggled out of the Philippines and then repatriated when they were confiscated by US Customs upon the Marcoses' arrival in Hawaii. When they returned to the country, they were immediately, I guess, brought into the custody of the Philippine Presidential Commission on Good Government, and they've been under lock and key in the central bank vaults ever since. And so we've been able to access some images of some of this, some components of the Hawaii collection through the PCGG in early 2016. And, these images have become the basis for this sculptural installation. And it's actually really, really great that Nice agreed to be part of this conversation, because I remember in I guess late 2018, 2019, when NICE was in residency here in London, we were just beginning to work on this project, and we were having discussions about, the kind of the process, and us beginning to acquaint ourselves with 3D printing in relation to this body of work. So it's appropriate that in many ways this project comes full circle. And I guess the most important aspect of having this conversation now is, in 2 days' time, the second Marcos presidency assumes power in the Philippines, and these reconstructions of their past, of our history, becomes even more important to talk about. So these conversations become even more necessary and even more urgent as the history tries to be distorted, edited, and maybe even erased. So yeah, very, very, very important to have these conversations. So I now bring you back to Boots to introduce Nice and Francis formally.
Thank you, Pio, for that introduction, and more importantly, for bringing the project to the Philippines at this crucial time, no? Through Ateneo and Ateneo Art Gallery. We have been receiving more guests since last week, especially when entry to the campus is now easier, and more classes have begun a mix of online and face-to-face sessions. Among the works, the jewelry collection has caught the interest of many guests, not only for its controversial story, but for its fine craftsmanship. And it is for this reason that we thought of holding this conversation between Francis and Nice, two young contemporary artists, and their shared experiences in transposing different contexts and concepts into tangible forms using digital technology. And as Pio mentioned, this in a way is a continuation of a conversation which Francis and Nice began 3 years ago. No? So Frances Wadsworth Jones is a jewelry designer, maker, and educator who lives and works in London. At the core of her practice is an interest in subverting jewelry traditions, combining a commitment to understanding and executing time honored processes of making with a conceptual rigor that allows these processes to be viewed in unexpected contexts. In her ongoing collaboration with Pio Abad, Wadsworth Jones extends the role of jewelry beyond adornment and into the realm of contemporary art and forensics. Nice Buenaventura, or sorry, recent projects of Francis include the Phantom Limb uh, in Jamil Arts Center recently, in 2019 in Dubai. Kiss the Hand You Cannot Bite at Cadiz, San Francisco, also in 2019. Fairs of the Fair at Bellas Artes here in the Philippines, in Manila, and Make Wrong Right Now, the second Honolulu Biennale, also in 2019. She is also a lecturer at the Royal College of Art and at Central St. Martin's School of Art and Design. Nice Benaventura will hold this conversation with her. Received her bachelor's degree in communication from the University of the Philippines and her dual master's degree in media and arts technology at the Ateneo de Manila University and Queen Mary University of London. She has presented exhibitions at Art Informal and West Gallery and has participated in group shows and art-adjacent projects in Bangkok, London, Manila, Melbourne, and Zurich. Her work revolves around the offloading of tensions, often between ethics and aesthetics, through drawing, painting, installation, and lay ethnography. In 2021, she received the Cultural Center of the Philippines 13 Artists Award and the Ateneo Art Awards Fernando Sobel Prizes for Visual Arts. So ladies, thank you for joining us today. Please turn on. Can I ask you to turn on your cameras and unmute your microphones? I will now hand the screen. Hello, Francis. Hi, nice. So I will now hand the screen to you both to begin this, I'm sure, an engaging conversation.
Thank you. Hi, Francis.
Hi, nice.
So
thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me as well. So I decided to just wear my glasses. We were talking about this during pre-prod, but just to make sure that things flow more smoothly, I decided to, yeah. So I'm very glad to be here today to chat with you about your work and your collaboration with Pio, and of course the very important work that resulted from it. So personally, I'm interested in both the work itself and the labor and other processes that went behind it, which I believe is why I'm here, owing to my recently acquired background in media and arts technology, as well as, of course, the grim history that the work seeks to address. But before we get to that, I think I'd like to begin with talking about your practice and the production of the collection of Jane Ryan and William Saunders, as I'm sure that you have a lot of fascinating things to tell us and show us. And so I feel like there's a lot to cover. So if I may begin, here's my first question.
Okay.
So my first question is, yes. So what was the collaboration with Pio like, perhaps in relation first to him being an artist, and then next also family, and how different was the workflow from your own as a designer?
I think, I mean, people often ask, like, is it difficult, living together, working together? But I think, like Pio said in his introduction, we've been together like 16 years. And
wow, a feat.
Yeah, you hear about creative couples that can go to their studios, do their own thing and really keep life and work separate. But I think Pio and I have never been like that. Like, we've always kind of shared our work. We get so much meaning from what we do. So it's a lot of our conversations are about work, which probably makes us sound very boring. But so in some
I
ways,
kind of can relate to that.
I was going to say, I mean, because you're in a couple of creatives as well, right? So, in some ways, it's just been kind of about formalizing that collaboration that is life. I think in terms of like the practicalities of working with Pio, I absolutely love it, because I am very much a maker. Like, I am never happier than when I am getting down and actually creating something, and everything around that doesn't interest me so much. And so when I'm working with Pio, the way we kind of divide the labor, I just get to do the bit that I absolutely love, and he takes care of the rest, which is kind of wonderful for me. I mean, in terms of, I don't know, Pio might disagree about how great the process is, because like I'm told I'm quite difficult to manage. I'm very hard-headed.
By who?
Previous bosses.
Okay.
Sometimes Pio. I don't like being told what to do. So, and I think for Pio as well, because he's out of control or part of the process of making his work, right?
That's true.
So I guess that it's but hopefully, like, I would be the only one that he would trust with that. So yeah.
Can you recall how this idea to work together officially came about? Like, was it your idea? Was it Pio's idea?
I actually remember it really well. Like, I can remember exactly where we were. We were on a train called the Docklands Light Railway, and we're pulling into Bank Station. And basically, I think it was 2017.
Okay.
And so Pio was already really deep into the project, and like he said, he'd been working with the PCGG. He'd got these images of the jewelry. He knew he wanted to do something with them, but then suddenly government had changed, and with Duterte being elected
in 2016, is that
so in 2016
right?
he was elected, right? I think the conversation was happening in, I don't know, it might have been as early as 2016 that this was happening with us talking,
Possibly.
but suddenly, like, suddenly Pio had these images that, I mean, I might try and share my screen now and show you some of them.
Yes, please.
So are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, so Pio had these incredible high-res images of the Hawaii connection, but didn't really know what the ownership of those images was anymore, whether he could use them, whether he would compromise anyone by using them. And at the same time, suddenly it was becoming really more urgent to be able to make the work, because there was meant to be a public exhibition of the actual jewelry, and now
the physical jewelry.
Yeah, the physical jewelry.
Okay.
And then it looked like this is, with Duterte coming in, like that might not actually happen anymore. So suddenly it became more urgent to actually work with this collection of
this set of photos.
Yeah, and this set of photos. So Pio
how did you acquire this?
So that was,
do you remember?
The PCGG.
The PCGG.
So Pio had been working with them, and they were going to do an auction of the jewelry, and these, I think, were actually photographs that were taken by Christie's for the auction catalogue. Now, of course, the auction never happened, neither did that public exhibition. But we had these photographs, and so Pio was saying, like, what do you think is the feasibility of, like, remaking the jewelry, perhaps in kind of cheap materials? And I think me, with my background in kind of 3D modeling, I kind of said, well, why don't we actually make it as more a sculpture? So creating the whole thing as a solid model, and then printing that all out as one piece. And so not even saying, not pretending to be jewelry in any way, but being more kind of an artist sketch of what the jewelry is. I think at the beginning, I was actually working with another jewelry designer called Sarah Gunn, who also is really great with 3D tech. But I quite quickly realized that actually it was really important for me personally to be making the work.
Okay. So you're saying there was an opportunity to work with another person. Okay.
And actually she was working on some of the models originally, but like, so basically this was coming off the back of, like, a really hard time. So Pio he had just lost his nano, and Duterte had been elected, and both Pio's parents really had kind of dedicated their lives to trying to to country and to trying to shape, like, the Philippines that they believe in. And so with Duterte being elected and then I dying, I think suddenly, like, that compounded the sense of grief and hopelessness, and I think me as a partner, for Pio, like, I just felt completely helpless. And I think something that people don't realize about Pio's work, like, obviously it's very political, but it's also incredibly personal. I think Pio, the way Pio's grown up, it's like Nation is, I don't really know how to put it, but like, Nation is another member of the family that is spoken about and worried about all the time.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that's so different,
especially if you're familiar. Sorry,
carry on again. Nice. Sorry, what
especially if you're familiar with this body of work, that statement that you just made makes a lot of sense
completely.
about Pio.
yeah, that's so different from my upbringing, where maybe, you know, maybe my parents, like growing up in England at the time they didn't have kind of that much to fight for. In a way, the fighting had been done by their parents, and so I kind of wasn't that politicized in a way growing up. But yeah, for Pio, when something happens in the nation, it's happening to him, and because we've been like together so long, like, you know, his hopes and dreams, they're my hopes and dreams, and when something happens to him, you know, I go through it too, but in that way, you know, I'm British, right? So it's never going to be my story,
right?
So like for me, I think it became really, like, I mean, Pio talks about you know, family as being archive and agent, and I think in this sense I'm the agent, and yeah, it became a really productive thing for me to be able to do, to actually show that I was turning up, and to be able to do something productive and helpful. I think the caveat is always, though, that I am, you know, I'm a white woman from London making work about Filipino politics, right? So I don't, you know, I think it's quite hard for me to talk about it in any other way other than personal. But it is like a hugely personal and like important thing for me to have done, I think. Yeah. So
I did have like an additional question. That I'd written right after I sent the initial set of questions to you via email, but I think you just answered it quite beautifully, actually. I was going to ask you about how you, because I can imagine that you carry some kind of emotional labor in not just in the context of your collaboration with Pio, in relation to his current exhibition, but also in the context of you guys being partners and for a long time at that. So I was going to ask you how you kind of navigate through that, because you know, as a Filipino, dedicating a life and a career to the cause to remember and resist erasure, as Pio has been doing, I know it to be, well, to say the least, a very harrowing experience. And for you to be a witness to that and to be physically present, some of that must be very visceral for you. And I wanted to know if you have other, you know, apart from what you've already explained, if you have like other ways of navigating through this emotional labor that comes with being partners with Pio.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think you just said it all kind of beautifully there as well, in terms of kind of how I feel about it. But yeah, for me, I think it's just that most of the time I felt very powerless and also voiceless in it, and through the making and through that labor, you know, I haven't had to have that voice, but like I said, I've been able to turn up. I've been able to actually feel like I have done something important. And for me, actually, like, this piece of work is an incredibly important one for me, because, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of, because, you know, it's something that I really think needs to exist. And
yes,
you know, so much of what is made out there is, you know, it in some ways frivolous, not frivolous in a bad way, but this kind of, in the sense that it, I don't know, it encapsulates a lot for me. And I really did think that, yeah, not only was it kind of like, you know, not only is it incredibly like seductive, like, you know, in form, and it was great to make, but it also needs to exist. Like, it says something very important, I think.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that Pio had said in his conversation with Ambeth Ocampo. I can't quote him verbatim, but I think what he said was, before you can introduce people to the polemic side of the work, you have to show the seductive side of it first. And I think that your collaborative work achieved that goal. So yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like you have to get people to look first, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So there's that element of seduction before you have understanding, I think. And yeah, I think the work kind of achieves that. So
yeah, it surely did. It does still. I guess before I ask you about the specifics of the production process, because I'm really interested in that. I don't know if you remember, but we did share a tube ride, I think
I
on
do
Christmas
remember.
Eve.
Yeah, I do.
Or was that New Year's? I can't remember, coming from a friend's house.
Yeah, I think
where, so where I asked you about your work. And I think that's the first time that I learned that you actually work with 3D technology. And I remember feeling, I don't know how to describe it, but I remember wanting to have known that fact earlier, because during the time that I met you, I was doing my postgrad in London in media and arts technology. And there were many moments of struggle and wanting any kind of help or information. Many things about the program didn't come, I guess, naturally to me. And so I did reach out to a lot of people who were more knowledgeable about the subject. And when I found out that you were just that person, although a bit too late.
As you're about to leave.
Yeah, because the semester had just closed. And so, yeah, and the tube ride was not that long, so we weren't really able to chat a lot about it. But I remember you did mention that you work a lot with 3D modeling and 3D printing. And that actually took me a little bit by surprise because, well, I don't really know much about jewelry making. Maybe my idea of jewelry making is quite outdated, because when I think of it, all I see in my head is like melting metals and pouring it in molds made of metal as well. So I guess there's a contemporary, practice that's flourishing right now in jewelry design that I'm just not aware of. And I said so many things. I lost my train of thought. But before we get into that, I remembered now. But before we get into the nitty gritty of that process, I wanted to ask like another thing that's a little bit more relevant to making some kind of, like, for the lack of a better word, kind of like a transition between design and art. Because in the past, I taught a Philippine design course in Ateneo. So I'm supposed to be teaching again, actually, but I've been on study leave for the longest time. And the pandemic happened, so there's been delays. But before, I used to teach Philippine design, and we often began the course by poring over the convergences and divergences of art and design, as well as kind of trying to determine when it's productive to think about these two fields separately. And I was wondering if you had realizations in this area, especially after having officially or formally collaborating with Pio and taking an active role in producing and presenting contemporary art.
Oof.
Sorry, take your time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, because I'm an educator too, like I should really think a lot more though about, design and art theory. But I think for me, the questions of, the differences between disciplines have never kind of interested me that much. It's much more about like the intersections for me. Like, so I think, like, for example, the kind of practices that I most admire, say someone like Noguchi, who, without any hierarchy can create sculpture, design playground equipment, make furniture. Like,
sorry, I missed the name. Who did you mention?
Isamu Noguchi.
Okay.
So yeah,
Noguchi.
So Noguchi, yes.
The lamps. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. The Ikari lamps, yes. But also incredible sculpture, which is, so he's worked with like mass manufacturing, but also with, stone carving. So like that's the kind of practice that really kind of,
Yeah, I get your
think
point.
it's so difficult to do though, right? But I think for me, because I've always seen it, like I approach everything, you know, with the same mindset, the same set of skills. Like it's just that the context that kind of changes. And yeah, I think within my career, like that's kind of applied as well, because I've always gone where, you know, the technique I use is always dictated by the idea, and then I've moved with the ideas into different contexts. So, you know, I've dabbled a bit in fashion, like I've been seen kind of within craft world or design, or now kind of with Pio formerly art, like, and I think I love that. I think the only it can become a bit difficult though, because I think people really like to be able to categorize. So like understand,
for some reason.
Yeah, and to talk about
like
you as well,
things
right?
to be neat. Yeah.
So I think being it's maybe been a little bit difficult being a jewelry designer, you know, who's come in working with an artist to create artwork, because I think the tendency is that I am seen as a technician rather than a co-creator.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So there's that layer.
Exactly. Yeah, there's that layer on there. So I think that's something I'm still kind of trying to work out how to navigate, because people, you know, they really want you to be one thing. It's not like an easy narrative, right?
Yeah.
And then also it's the fact that you know, not just that I'm a jewelry designer, but I'm also British. Again, making work with the Filipinos.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't fit any easy narrative there. But like, yeah, like I said, I think the gray areas between things, the intersections, are where I think the most kind of exciting and interesting things happen. So I think that's what I kind of aspire to be.
Okay, that bit kind of like made me appreciate like opportunities like this more, because without, you know, conversations like this, things don't get clarified, wrong things get assumed, and so it's a nice opportunity to, you know, assert, kind of like rightfully assert your place in a certain situation, like in this case your collaboration with Pio. I was also wanting to find out, I'm this is like a little bit of a jump, but I would want to know if you've always been interested in jewelry and jewelry making, and what is it about it that really, you know, appealed to you?
I think okay, so having just said that I am not interested in talks about differences between art and design, I'm now going to say, I think I'm most naturally a designer, in the sense that I need parameters. I need, and you know, with jewelry, you have that kind of parameter of the body. But also I think that like jewelry is like it's, in a weird way, it is kind of one of those middle spaces, because although it's kind of seen within design, there isn't so much a problem to solve. It's not like, you know, we don't need jewelry, right? Like it's not like you need a vessel to drink out of and then you design for that, but we choose to have it in our lives, right?
So a nice to have versus a need to have.
And so I think jewelry kind of that's why I found it fascinating, because it's almost, you know, it is more like small sculpture in a way, but it says so much about our, you know, it says so much about our culture and identity, and so I find that really fascinating. I think in terms of, I think I tend towards the small all the time, like for me, again, another part
delicate stuff.
Yeah, a part of this project that was so great was like, this is the biggest thing I've ever made, right? I quite often like say like my life's work fits in a Tupperware, right? Like, because everything I do is so tiny. So you know, this has been great to be able to kind of work on a large scale. But I think that's another reason why jewelry kind of drew me to it, because of that scale, because it's sculptural. I also really love working with metal. And I come from like a really long line of practical people. Like I come from a line of like welders and mechanics. So in some ways,
you were
it's
predisposed.
I was predisposed. Yeah, exactly. But I think another thing that I think is really beautiful about jewelry is the way that, like, when I make something, and then someone has it, and it becomes like a witness to people's lives, right? It goes on and it lives with them. And
that's true.
Pia and I had lots of kind of conversations about this while we were working on this project, this idea of like jewelry as a witness. Because when you think about it as well, especially like a collection, like, I mean, I'll share my screen again, like a collection of these, of jewels like these, you kind of think, God, they've been in the rooms where things have happened. Like some of these, like, I don't think I actually have any images of them, but, some of them are Romanov pieces. So they've lived through multiple revolutions. Some of them were probably on the bodies of people when, famously when the Romanovs were killed, they were wearing their jewelry.
Were killed,
So
wow.
there's kind of something sinister about it as well. With a collection of jewelry like this, you wonder what it's seen, what it's lived through. It persists, right? And I think there's something kind of incredible about that. And so talking about evidence and witnesses like that, that was something that kind of kept coming back to us as we were working on the project.
Right.
Sorry, I hope that's helpful. That's probably quite a confusing answer.
No, not at all. It reminds me of how crystals especially carry like a certain energy. And so I guess, through the years, through the many histories it's witnessed, it serves some kind of like an abstract, or contains an abstract time capsule of sorts, and it's very romantic to think of it that way.
And
you mentioned go ahead.
I was just going to say, like an heirloom, right? That's why like heirlooms are so important to us. They're like, they're infused with the like molecules and DNA of like our loved ones, our ancestors, and there's a continuity,
and you can hold it
and
keep.
And the fact that, say, with I'm not necessarily the biggest advocate of diamonds, but there's something incredible about whatever kind of diamond you have, whether it's like top quality or not. Like it's 3 billion years old. You're holding 3 billion years in your hands. So
because it takes that many years to form.
So there's something kind of, I think, really beautiful and incredible about that.
I'm sure. I'm getting like a little bit of goosebumps. You mentioned welder earlier, and I've been wanting to insert this somewhere, because I had written down a question here about your style. Because I've gone through your Instagram before, even before the idea of having this chat together, and noticed that it's very playful. And I'm referencing the welder bit in your history that you mentioned just now, because is that the reason, or does that like form part of the reason that you use these playful elements like screws, very industrial motifs in your fine jewelry? Where did that aesthetic come from?
I think that kind of industrial aesthetic is probably from the sense of being able to be more than one thing, right? I think that's another great thing about being
a running
theme. Designer. Like another great thing, about being a jewelry designer is that you're quite often, or what I like to do anyway, and maybe I'll show just a couple of quick images of my work. Like, you've got like a series of forms you can work with, right, that people really think they understand, and perhaps they don't expect that much from. So it's quite easy to surprise people, to create that kind of sense of uncanniness. I think there's also quite often a sense of like I mean, the industrial you were talking about,
Mhm.
I think that's, you know, we have certain expectations about femininity, and I think that kind of
Oh, I
industrial
see.
coming in was more about,
Mhm.
yeah, just kind of trying to disrupt
Yeah,
that
some
a bit, and what,
resistance.
yeah, exactly, and what femininity is anyway, you know.
Very
But
true.
yeah, so
I
these are,
also particularly like the pearl earrings itself wearing earrings or themselves wearing earrings.
yeah, kind of
The
meta.
the, the meta
Yeah,
pearl earrings. Very
yeah.
nice.
Thanks.
So yeah, I had a follow up here, but I think that you had answered that. Okay, so can we? I would like to move to your training. Here is where my background comes in handy. So I'm really very curious about your training because I feel like my training, um, not that it's inadequate, but I feel like if I wanted to pursue media arts continuously and towards the future, I would still need to learn a lot more. And so I wanted to ask you, um, as you very clearly have a good grasp of the technique and the technology required by the specifically by the work that you and Pia did. So I'm curious about what it was like to model the jewelry. I'm talking about the collection of Jane Ryan and William Saunders specifically at the
Mm.
exhibition from mere photos. I mean, where did all that skill come from, right? I'm sure it involved a lot of calculated guesswork. So I'm also wondering how are you at math? Because I'm sure that also plays into the process.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can calculate the circumference of a circle to make rings, and that's about it for my maths. But yeah, I think well, so okay, so my background, I think what a lot of people probably don't know is like the jewelry industry in the UK anyway, or Europe, I'm not sure in the Philippines, but has been a really early adapter of 3D technologies, right? Because
Oh, I see.
yeah, because like
I think it's the opposite here.
right, okay, so basically,
Mhm.
so here, because so it's something so small that can require really tight tolerances,
Mhm.
and basically, so 3D printing into wax started happening really quite early, and then that was
How
that's then
early are we talking about?
so my first 3D modeling project I did at uni in 2005. So yeah, it's
No,
quite a long
what?
time.
I didn't even know that it existed then.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the
2005.
printers were not as good then, for sure.
For sure.
But certainly I was 3D printing into wax by 2008, for sure, on my MA at Royal College. Because, you know, for me, it allows me to kind of create the sense of, you know, detail that I really need within my work for something to, like, you know, disappear at a distance and read as a different world up close. But yeah, so it's not that uncommon for a jeweler to kind of know these technologies. Yeah, so things are printed into wax, and then it goes through a very traditional process of like lost wax casting, which is where the wax gets put into plaster, the wax gets melted out, and then the molten metal is poured in. So you've created a mold that way. And right. I would say probably now about, like, in terms of you know, not so much as like artisanal jewelry or designer kind of maker jewelry, but in terms of the bigger jewelry industry, I'd say probably about 80% of stuff here has gone through some kind of CAD or CAM yeah, technologies. 80%. So I would say so, yeah, in the UK. Not so much with, you know, individual makers maybe, but certainly like the big, you know, houses and stuff are now using a lot of it, and have been for a while. So yeah, for me, I kind of am basically self-taught in it because I needed it to be able to make the kind of work that I wanted to make. But I had never I mean, I could not have imagined in 2016 that I would make the pieces that I've made with Pia. Honestly, it was a complete trial by fire for me. So, okay, so this is, I think, another thing that people don't really understand, and I don't quite know why, but they don't realize that I'm like, people think that the jewelry's been 3D scanned and then printed, but it's like, no, like it's been sculpted. I have worked from nothing. I've worked from a blank
sculpted
screen.
digitally.
Exactly. I think that surprises kind of a lot of people, but I use this. So the software I use is I was using Rhino 5, and Rhino is a program that is it's usually used for engineering and architecture and jewelry, because it requires really tight tolerances, but it's not oh gosh, sorry, I'm losing my words with my post-COVID brain. It's not intuitive in the sense of like there are some programs like there's one called ZBrush, for example, which is much more about digitally sculpting. ZBrush, yeah. And
I'm taking down notes.
No problem. That one's much more like you start with a lump of clay almost, and then you can sculpt. So it's much more like, much more intuitive. Whereas with Rhino, you kind of really need to know what you want to achieve, and it's incredibly precise. And so what I've got up on the screen now is part of the process. So I would put the single photo that I had up in the background on the screen, and then I'd start working on top of it, like building everything from scratch, basically. So, and with Rhino, I don't know if you've ever used it, but say you're working in 3 dimensions. So here you can, you can see the different views of the object
isometric
working on all at the same time. Yeah. And then you have your perspective view at the same time. So I think one thing, like I was really, because this whole project was like presenting fact and evidence, like I really didn't want to make anything up, or as little as I possibly could. Like, so actually this is kind of a rare piece. The tiaras are the only ones that have any kind of really volume in that way, where I've actually bent them round. Everything else is completely flat and extruded, because where I didn't have the information, because I was only working one view, I didn't want to make it up. So for example, with these ones, like you can see, like if you look at the sides, no piece of jewelry is like that. It's so it's kind of much more about that was kind of like the forensic reconstruction kind of. I didn't want to be adding too much of myself into it, but at the same time, like if we go back here, like especially with something, say like the diamond, there's no sense of scale, right? I'm just working from a photograph, and the only time I would have that sense of scale is like here, where you say have a bracelet. So I would, guesstimate in terms of, okay, I think the bracelet would fit in this way, or the necklace would fit in this way. I was making guesses in that way, and all these pieces, I'm working on it at the same time. And I mean, this is a very embarrassing screen. It's such a messy, the mess.
No one would be able to tell.
But I'd be working on things simultaneously, keeping things in proportion, but there has to be some element of creative speculation in that sense. So I think that was why it was really important for, we're not saying this is jewelry, this is sculpture, this is an artist's sketch, although we've tried to be as true to it as we possibly can be. So this is like an in production kind of image. This is one of the bracelets finally finished in how I view it when I'm modeling it. And the brooch,
the bracelet actually looks like because of the extrusions, it also looks like a building from the side. So it becomes this architectural thing rather than just jewelry. So that's another read.
No, completely. And I think as well, like, because this program is used for architecture sometimes, right? And
Right, yeah.
and this is like an interesting
Cool.
thing about the digital space, because like I'm making this, but you know, this at the moment has no scale, right? It's
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, it's
theoretically.
expandable to
Exactly, like
infinity. Hmm.
exactly. So it could be a building or it could be a tiny piece of jewelry. So it's not until you really
Oh, yeah,
you scale it and you
right.
decide
Hmm.
how to produce it or print it. I mean, we'll probably come back to that
Yeah.
a little bit later with some of the bigger pieces we've made. But yeah, so I think, and there's something about that as well with working with digital technologies that I find it really difficult, because I quite often feel like I don't really understand the piece until it finally comes out, right, and is printed. It's
Hmm.
like I never really fully understood it until it's there in my hands, because that digital space is so theoretical.
Yeah. So I came across the VR project, which you can talk about later.
Yeah.
I was able to read some of the parts of your conversation with two other people. Sorry, memory fog. I don't get to claim memory fog, memory gap then.
Yeah.
But I think it was mentioned by Pio, I think Pio Bud, that here aura lies in the digital file, right? And not the
Yeah.
physical object. And that struck me because in my own practice, I often deal with this idea of the aura of authenticity and how Walter Benjamin claimed that this is not replicable and that it solely belongs to the original work of art. And when I read that part where I think Pio was the one who mentioned it, that the aura here is actually the digital file, which
Yeah, it's
also,
kind of encoded.
in a manner of speaking, a computer code. Um, in this context, then the aura is replicable because it's a digital file and it's confined in a digital space. And by virtue of that, it can be repeated over and over, and you can make, thousands of iterations depending on the need or the want. And I just find that idea very fascinating because, yes, we disproved that the aura cannot, that the aura can
Yeah.
actually be replicated. So that was a nice read into the work. The catalog that you have for the show also mentions that the material you used is resin. In terms of ease of use, maybe also accessibility and material cost, how does resin compare to plastic filaments, or are these two different? I'm not so sure.
You know what? The absolutely terrible thing is I am not entirely sure. The question was about PLA, and I was trying to do a lot of research on it, and I couldn't quite work out if this is a PLA or not. But I can, I mean, I can tell you. So the material that's the resin that's used for this is called so it's called Vero. I'm going to read this out actually because it's all quite technical. It's called Vero
Okay,
white
cool.
resin. So, and it's
White
an opaque
resin.
Vero white resin, and it's an opaque polyjet resin. So the process of creating these pieces in this material, basically it happens within a batch of photosensitive polymer liquid, right? So there's a batch of liquid, and UV light is then put through that in an incredibly specific way, layer by layer, to solidify the material. So apparently this is called fine layer polymerization. So it goes from being in that liquid state to becoming this kind of opaque resin. And it's then put under so once it comes out of the bath, because when you 3D print, you often need supports that are put in a different material to make sure things print correctly, and it then goes under water jets to dissolve away the supports, and then you're left with the piece.
Well, if you have those advanced 3D printers, Because from my
Yes.
experience, some some printers can't do the jets.
Right.
So
Yeah,
you
well,
have to
exactly.
manually, yeah,
And the capabilities of different printers are really different.
very
So
different.
I I mean, the bit that I really know about is the digital modeling. And so for me, I would make a 3D model. I'd then save it as a stereolithography file, which is a file that they use for like additive manufacture, so manufacture that's kind of building. And I would then give that to so they're called Rapid Form, and they're the team at Royal College of Art, so my old school. And I'm guessing they're probably similar to your Makerspace facility.
Probably.
Yeah, so they work with the students mostly, but I've worked with them as well as kind of tutor and alumni. And they printed it for me basically. So that's kind of as much as I know about the technology, but they have a lot of different types of printers. But yeah.
And I heard that it took like 2 weeks, I think, to complete the printing process.
I think it was kind of the number of pieces that they had together, how they were fitting things on the bed. I think there was lots of kind of technicalities that way as well. So yeah, as I say, I can't honestly say that I know the details of how long it took in that way. Right. But for me, I just know that the modeling was like a year of my life. So.
Wow, a year. Well, you did,
yeah, I mean,
how
not
many? 24, right?
Pardon?
Right.
Yeah, 24.
24?
Yeah. And they were
based on the 24 photos.
Yeah, the Hawaii collection is much bigger. I think it was something like 300 pieces, but yeah, we only had the photos for these 24. So I was just working with what we had. So it's only a very small snapshot of, you know, the amount that was amassed by the Marcoses.
Do you know if Christie's was able to document each and every one of the hoard, or is it really just 24?
I don't actually know. I'm sure more were documented than the ones we actually have, because like you can actually, if you look online, you can see photographs from the valuation and the press stuff then, where they were holding kind of other pieces.
You mean your work?
No, so when Christie's were valuing,
this is public.
Yeah, public. Yeah, you can find it online. Yeah, so they're probably Getty images, I think, but you can see them anyway. And you can see there were a lot more pieces out on the table there, so there may be more documentation, but yeah, we were just working with what we had.
24, I think, is a
it was number. Enough for me.
Yeah, for sure, I can imagine. I was able to we were there, right? Cost just passed. We were able to attend Pio's talk at SOAS, University of London. We almost didn't make it, actually. We went to a different room, but anyway, eventually we found it. And I remember during the Q&A portion, I did ask, he was talking about the same project. And I remember during the Q&A, I did ask him about the significance of the choice of medium for this particular series. I just want to ask you as well, because you might have like a different take on the matter. So I wanted to ask what the significance of the choice of medium is in relation to your artistic intent. And maybe you can expound a little bit on forensic reconstruction, creative speculation, and spectral lineup. So these are terms that I all encountered in your exhibition notes.
Yeah, so so maybe like going back to the machine that it was printed on. So the machine is it's called an objet, and this material, it's used for prototyping normally because it has an incredible amount of detail, but it doesn't have a lot of strength. So it's not really used for working parts. It's used.
So it's not durable.
Yeah, exactly. It's used for, or not durable in the sense of that it can be in moving things really. so it's used for visualization, like primarily. So
can you use it
yeah,
to make molds as well, or just for
yeah, I think
visualization?
you could as well. There would still be a certain amount of print lines, perhaps.
Yeah, the texture.
Exactly, that you might want to try and clean up before creating a mold. But it is like one of the finest prints, really.
Okay.
And I thought there was just something kind of, to me, there was something really honest about using like a prototyping material to create the pieces. It's kind of this because we're not saying they're the actual jewelry, they're an in-between, they're a sketch, right? So to use a prototyping material, which is kind of this like liminal material, this in-between, seemed like very honest to me, which I really liked. I think one thing we were really that was very purposeful was kind of the stripping back of color as well, that we would, because there are technologies now with 3D printing where you can print into different materials, different colors within one piece. And actually for us, I think the idea of this like stripping back of color, the taking away of a real sense of materials and that sparkliness became kind of an important way of almost like removing distractions so that you can see the pieces in a different way, right? So, and I think that, especially when you combine it with the equivalent values, which is how we've always displayed it, so the values of what the jewelry would be worth to the country.
Insane. The equivalencies can't wrap your head around it.
And they were from the PCGG. They were things that were calculated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so you stop kind of looking at, oh wow, this beautiful sparkly thing. You think, oh my God, this could have been an airport. This could have been a whole vaccination program. And I think that stripping of color was like really important there. I think as well, the material specifically, like I think there's something kind of magical about it in its like, because it's not completely opaque, it still has a slight amount of transparency to it that plays the light, that almost makes it kind of it almost kind of emanates something, or to me anyway.
There is a luster. I've seen it in person, and I know, I mean, maybe because of my background, I did recognize it as a 3D print. But upon closer inspection, it did look like a very, very fine 3D print. Because I think that's achieved by that thing that you just said, where it's not 100% opaque. And so some of the light still passes through and creates that kind of like ghostly aura. Exactly, which is super nice.
And I think again, when you're like like you said, we kind of talk about this spectral lineup, which again, especially like how we present it, like all very much in a line, like evidence, but also almost like a police lineup of criminals in a way, but also like this sense of of ghosts. Like this is the ghost of an exhibition that, a public exhibition that didn't get to happen. And it's also the like materializing of things that you don't get to see, right? Like these things are locked away. So I think that ghostliness was something.
Do we know where they are locked away?
Wow,
we know where the ghosts are.
Hidden in a bank vault, I think. But the terrifying thing, right, is that like with the results of the election, God knows where they might go, right? And whose head they might be sitting on pretty soon. Like, so it's quite a frightening.
Daunting to say the least. Like Pio mentioned earlier, just 2 more days. Yeah.
So but the material was, I know, like you said, you recognize it as well as a 3D print, but I think quite a lot of people that maybe don't know the technology so well. Like we got a lot of people saying, is it ivory? Is it sugar? Is it
like
there's ambiguity, or is it bone? And I think that ambiguity is really quite beautiful, and is that added layer kind of to the work.
Yeah. It's always nice, to present multiple entry points into your work that, enriches the conversation and more importantly, keeps it going. I would also like to ask you about that bit about I mentioned in the beginning about the grim history that this work seeks to address. So engaging with the history of the subject of your work, I was wondering what specifically you, hope that it and the rest of the exhibition that it's a part of would achieve. Because, through the years, I've learned that works of a political nature carry a certain responsibility and are often expected to have concurrent, or if not concurrent, follow through projects, lest your intent be limited or confined to the singular gesture, which is the exhibition. So I was thinking that maybe you can talk about the other projects related to this, in order to avoid that trap.
Yeah. Well, I guess for a start, like the work, I don't think that the sincerity of the work can be doubted in a way, and the commitment can be doubted, because that it's it's not in isolation. It's part of a 10-year project for PO. Like,
that's true. Yeah, I think that's very important to lay now on the table. It's been that long.
There is so much commitment there.
Yes.
I think for me, like you were saying, like what was my personal kind of hope with it, and I think my personal hope would be the same as Pio's, in the sense of kind of education, in the sense of trying to just present facts, and especially at a time when it feels like history is being rewritten. I mean, I had a conversation with our goddaughter who's in the Philippines, and she was saying to me, she's I think 18 now, but she was saying that her friends didn't believe that any of it was true, in terms of what had been stolen, and in terms of like, ill-gotten wealth, but like by the Marcoses. And so she actually took her friends to the exhibition, and they ended up going to Lenny rallies together. And to me, wow. I thought, okay, that's doing something. Like I think kind of that kind of brings me on to the next bit, which is that, and I'm sure you feel this as well, that any kind of art making is always going to be a little bit elitist. When you're showing in a gallery, only certain people are going to get to see it. So I think for us, another like important iteration of the project was the online version that we did. And let me see, I'll probably come back to those. I'm going to share a different screen with you, if that's okay. So okay, so this is basically, so we had the opportunity, because we were working with CCP and 21 AM, which is the digital museum within the CCP, and Marianne Pastor Rosas, she invited us to kind of be part of this, and we saw it as a really like an important chance to be able to kind of make the project more accessible. And so for 21 AM we created a website, which is like a digital way of accessing the collection. So one element of it is that you can view the collection and you can see these equivalent values again, and it was very important for us that this would be something that is workable not just on the desktop but also on your phone, because as we've seen, like, this election has been won on through people's social media, through people's phones. So we really wanted because more people have phones than desktops as well, so like to be able for people to access it and to get the information themselves without having to necessarily come to a gallery, be able to see it in Hawaii or be able to see it in Dubai, but to be able to, and I think another part of it is let me stop share here and try again, is we also made it into AR. So part of, let's see if this works. So part of the project was that people can repossess the jewelry. They can take it back into their own homes. They can explore it that way.
I did try it. It was so much fun.
Did you? Did it work for you? Because I think it does. I mean, if you look at the models as well, we had to reduce them a lot to be able to, we had to compromise on the quality to be able to let more people see them with less connection, which is why they're not as detailed as, so some of the ones that you were seeing on my screen earlier on. But and, the idea for us was that people can, put it in their environment and then share these photos with us, and that we would then share them online as part of this kind of your own collection. So it was a way to try and get, allow the Filipino people to repossess jewelry.
It's very important to reach more people outside of the gallery. I really appreciate that you mentioned this kind of like conflict, like as artists and designers, this incongruence in our practice that we have to navigate every day. How, when we work with themes like this, and at the same time we can't avoid the elitism that is kind of like woven into the system that we operate in. And so it's nice to know that efforts like this exist, and commitments such as yours and Theo exists, and that it really involves work. You can't just expect to get your aesthetics and your politics from doing the same things. And so I want to be able to highlight that, a project as complex as this, is I would say that it was a better route in trying to achieve the objectives that you guys have set.
Thank you. I think it's also I think that sense of democratic gesture is something that does run throughout Pio's work as well, like with the postcards. I think there's always that effort to try and give people something that they can take away. I mean, I know for Pio, when he sees those postcards, he was being sent messages of people putting them in their doctor's waiting rooms, or so more people could access it. And I know that's what the work really kind of comes to life for him there.
There's a soft resistance in that's also equally important as the literal resistance that happens on the street. And I find this entire thing very engaging and effective as well. Maybe before I stray away from this subject, I also wanted to ask you about the tape acquisition. So which lots did they acquire specifically? Was it only this collaborative work? And I wonder if they approached you and that they were explicit about any motivation or objective that they had in trying to acquire your work.
Well, it was acquired by the Southeast Asian Committee, and it's a really long process as well, the acquisition process. So we knew that it could possibly be happening for, I think, because COVID made it longer as well, but for about almost a year before we announced. But it goes through a lot of different people. It gets a lot of eyes on it. So I think what's kind of great is that a lot of people have kind of deemed it a project that is worthy and that hits home. And I think that it's brilliant as well because the state of Hawaii actually acquired the first edition we made, which we made for the Honolulu biennial.
Did they commission it as well?
Yeah, they commissioned it and then they purchased it. Yeah, and because I think as well, where the work is shown, it takes on different meanings, right? And in Hawaii, just like in Manila, like it means so much because in the sense it's kind of the scene of the crime, but it's also people remember histories, like so. So it might be relatively, you know, whereas when it's in Dubai, a different meaning again.
Right at the moment.
Not at the moment. We showed it as part of Phantom Limb, and then and then Art Jamil actually purchased the work for their collection.
Congratulations.
But there, of course, because there's so many Filipino OFWs, it means something slightly different there. And I think it's going to be interesting what it means in London and how the history connects there.
It's super nice because it's like, you know, physically spreading the word, you know, beyond Philippine shores, extending the conversation globally, which I think is very important, especially today, as you mentioned earlier, that it's so easy to rewrite history, especially with all of these technologies at our disposal. So, wow, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm down to my last two. And I'm about to ask you the thing that I, in the email, I said I wasn't sure if I can ask. But anyway, you said yes. So I remember Pio asking me in London maybe it was 2019, about how set or how ready the makerspace or our facility in Ateneo was because of an upcoming exhibition he was going to have here. I'm wondering if as early as then, 2019, the possibility of a Marcos restoration was already on his mind, you know, if he was already anticipating it, although grimly for sure, and if this influenced the schedule for the exhibition.
Well, I think like he always knew that this would be happening during election time. He just didn't know quite what election it was going to be, if you see what I mean. I don't necessarily know that he could have envisaged that like this show would be on at the same time as another Marcos is being proclaimed president. Like I don't know that the vision was that clear, but 100%, like you know, when we were talking, Duterte had been elected, Ferdinand Marcos had been buried in the Heroes Cemetery.
Yeah, you have all of these like signposts leading to what's happening today.
Bongbong had come quite close to winning the vice presidency. So yeah, the signs were definitely there, and the project was becoming much more urgent for Pio. Like it had gone from like documenting something to being like a living thing that was changing as events were changing.
Yeah.
And so I think, but I guess that I feel like it's kind of the same all over the world. It's not just the Philippines. All these things are happening that we feel like, oh my God, how could this have happened?
Yeah.
You also feel like, you know, if we'd all just been paying a little bit more attention, we might have seen it all coming, seen Brexit, seen Roe versus Wade being overturned.
It happened under our noses.
Exactly, all of it. Yeah. So I think and this show, I know, like through all my conversations with Pio, was so important to him because, you know, it's a homecoming, but it's also where the work belongs and where it means the most and where it could actually potentially make the most difference. And, you know, it's a stand against all of these, you know, rewritings as well. It's trying to present fact in an artistic but simple way to say, no, this is the history.
Yeah. This iteration currently in the Ateneo Art Gallery, how did that come about? Was it something that you guys proposed, or were you approached by AAG? Yeah. Was there like,
not quite sure how the conversations between Boots and Pio started. They might want to interject at some point here, but I do think it was shortly after Pio's mother died, and she was very involved with Ateneo, and her wake was at Ateneo, and I think for Pio, and this is also Ateneo, is where both Pio's parents were incarcerated during the Marcos dictatorship. So it's a really personal site for Pio, and also a really important one in terms of for activists and for the country and for education, right? So I think for him, it was the ultimate site to show the work.
True. Makes complete sense now after you've explained that why the Ateneo Art Gallery. Yeah, it's a beautiful homecoming.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and it's been something that's been on Pio's mind for a really long time, and it's kind of,
although underpinned by certain unfortunate events, but yeah, it's nice that it's in the Ateneo right now.
Yeah.
So anything that's next for the exhibition? Are there plans to stage it, or better yet, do you and Pio also have plans on working on other projects? Maybe not necessarily related to this one that you just mounted.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well. Oh wait, there were parts to that question. Can you remind me of them again?
Okay.
At the end.
Let's break it into two.
Thank you.
Is there anything next for the exhibition? Are there plans to restage it?
So I think for this exhibition, for this piece of work, the collection as the 24 3D printed objects, which we kind of consider as one sculpture. I don't know. I'm hoping that the next time we see it will be in the Tate. Yeah, fingers crossed for that. But in terms of us working together, yes, definitely. There are other projects kind of on the horizon. Pio has a show in the Ashmolean Gallery in Oxford in, I think it's 2024, which we're already working on a piece for that.
The two of you?
Yeah, the two of us. I mean, it's a part of a larger show for Pio, but I'm coming with work.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Excited for that.
Yeah, and then I think that's the thing. I'm so open to working with Pio, and I've really loved this process and this journey. But it's about having the right project, right? And I think for me, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about how I approach my own work. It's the right technique and the right material for every idea. Like I hate digital for digital's sake, for example, which is why I loved the digital, not the digital, the online iteration of this project. The VR, because for me, that was where VR really made sense. It's like, wow, people can actually take it back. Or
digital restitution.
Exactly, digital restitution.
For the win.
Hashtag. So yeah, for me, that really made sense. I think for us working together again, it's about finding that moment when it really makes sense. And how we might be able to use our joint resources and skills for something.
Can you tell this early if it's going to involve jewelry again or not yet?
Well, for the Ashmolean piece, yes, it does involve another piece of jewelry which has almost like an even more complex history in a way. It's part of one of the Marcos collections, but
I'm sure with your skill.
But I mean, I won't say too much about it because I don't know how much Pio wants to talk about it. But yeah, there are multiple levels. Spoiler. So.
Is the series at Ateneo the one going back to the tape?
So yeah, it's the same work. Yes. So.
I think that's it for me, unless you have parting words for our audience.
I feel
so
like
maybe we can call back Pio.
Yeah, I feel like people are probably done with my voice. So
yeah, if they're still here.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can hear me well because the rain just started pouring.
Oh yeah, it's fine from my end.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Pio.
Hi.
No, that was great. That was great.
Oh, thank you. I hope I was able to do your
No, that was really lovely. Nice. It was, yeah, really insightful questions. Thanks.
I think there was one question actually from the audience.
Yeah.
Yes. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, Boots, please.
Sige. Okay, this is from Nikki Nix, who's watching the conversation via FB Live. The question is, may I ask what substantial limitations have you encountered in producing your designs? So specifically, this is for Frances, obviously.
Substantial
limitations.
I'm not sure that I entirely, I'm so sorry, Nikki, I'm not sure I entirely understand the question, but I guess if it's to do with limitations of material, then say with this particular jewelry project, understanding the strength of the resin or not necessarily understanding the strength of the resin. So working out kind of the thicknesses of things. So stuff is much more chunky than the real jewelry would actually be. But I think that's kind of, that adds to it because it becomes something more sculptural or, like you said, nice, a kind of a bit more kind of architectural in a way. Yeah, it doesn't pretend to be anything it's not. And that probably actually came from a limitation of that prototyping material. So I'm not sure if that answers the question in quite the way that was meant, but yeah.
I think she was referring to limitations in terms of material, because that was around the time when you were talking about the kind of plastic or resin, no?
Perfect. Okay.
And that's when the question appeared. Yeah, thank you for that conversation. Pio, would you like to do you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
Any questions?
Covered. I think just to add to forthcoming projects, we're also doing the Kochi Biennial in India, Kerala later.
Oh, right.
Year, so, where again it's jewelry related, but I think as Frances and Nice talked about, the moment you have these models, you can start kind of playing around with scale, with material, and so I think with where the work is moving towards is. And it's something that we've already did for a show in San Francisco in 2019. Like the idea
Do you want me to show the image, Pia?
Yeah, sure. The idea of monumentality, the idea that these jewels stop becoming accessories, but they become like kind of bodies, really, like corpses. So I think whether Frances is happy about it or not, we're gonna keep working together.
You mean she has no choice?
Agent. I'm agent.
Okay.
One thing that's maybe interesting to say about this, I don't know, just for you, Nice, because like it's almost the opposite way of manufacture. Like I was talking about additive manufacture for the 3D printing, but yeah, once you have those models, this was CNC milled, so kind of reductive.
I see.
So parts of the piece were milled and then molded and then cast in concrete. So again, like you said, that aura is encoded, but the meaning changes through the state of material.
Yeah. This was in concrete. The mold was made of what again?
Silicon.
What was the mold? Silicon. Yeah, and this was CNC milled into foam first.
Okay. Cool.
And then the pearls are little bowling balls for kids.
Oh, no way.
That we cast.
Oh, I see.
I don't know that that's true. I think they might be bulls, like bulls, like the French, rather than baby bowling.
Yeah.
Wala na naman ako. Sorry. Shoot.
Okay, right.
Yeah, that's great. Oh,
Oh,
lost Boots.
Oh,
she got disconnected.
Oh, there she is.
Sorry. We've been having technical issues just a few minutes ago. So we were in and out. Yeah, sorry.
okay.
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much. I think, I
Yeah,
think it was a
thank
great
you.
chat.
Yep. Also,
Thank
I want to
you.
add, nice, you were asking about how this all started.
Oh, yes.
So yeah,
yes.
Pia and I, it was during his mom's wake
Yeah.
You guys
that we
started
agreed
here,
to have this
so sorry to hear
show
about that here.
Yeah.
in 2022. So that was 2017, right?
2017, yeah. October 2017.
And he
Okay.
really wanted the exhibit to open before the elections because it's always 6 years, 6 year term, and the election happens on the first. Is that the first Monday of May, or is it always May 9? I can't remember now.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, so that was really part of the schedule, the planning. We really
Okay.
were aiming for that.
We just didn't know how specific it was.
Yes.
It was going to be this specific.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Like what I said in the opening, no, this exhibit, no matter what the result would be in the elections, it will continue to be relevant, no? And
Yeah.
we hope more people would check out the online iterations of the 21 AM project. And then we also have uploaded the virtual tour of Pia's exhibit just a few minutes ago.
Oh,
It's also
okay.
available in our
Is it on
website.
Facebook or your
Website.
website?
Yeah.
Ah,
So
brilliant.
Brilliant.
there were just a few more edits that we asked the team to work on. And then in line with Pia's project, we actually started a partnership with the Ateneo Martial Law Museum um, for a series of interviews with Ateneo alumni and Jesuits about their personal experiences during the martial law. And the first, of course, that we interviewed is Pia's dad, Butch Abad, and we will be publishing online the interview in time for by June 30 in 2 days time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that will again be available online for everyone to access. So yeah, thank you for that conversation. I think what was interesting was what you touched on was both personal, technical, and political. Interesting how those different aspects were put into the conversation. So thank you. The recording of this conversation will be available also through our Facebook page and I think YouTube channel. So you can share it also. And I really love how Francis, how you showed the process. No? Unfortunately, that was the time when we were in and out of the conversation. So I'm looking forward to seeing the recording. It will be a complete one.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. There was one more question. I'll just quickly answer.
There is? Okay. Yes, please.
I think the exhibition's existence now seems more quote unquote threatened as the inauguration nears. Will the status of the exhibition change in terms of censorship? The answer is no. It
No.
will stand there in July 1 as a testimony to what history is.
Yes, definitely. We've committed to it will be on until July
Yeah.
30.
Like 30, yeah.
The virtual tour
They
will
can
be
try.
up indefinitely, can be accessed indefinitely, and there will be continuing programs in this same line, no?
Yeah. Oh, and we're
Even after
also
Pia's exhibit.
I have to work on it, but we're releasing
All right.
some
Yeah, that's
adult
actually
adult
interesting.
coloring books for stress management and anger management on also
Sign us up.
related to the jewelry. So
Yes.
watch
So
this
Pia's
space.
working on that.
Or
Yeah.
encoded.
Oh, really?
Restitution version 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
it
Adult
doesn't
coloring.
have to be digital. You
Yeah.
can download it and literally
Yeah. Yeah.
color
Color
your
all
own
day.
jewelry. Okay. So
Yeah, thanks very much.
yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
again, Francis, and
Oh, thank
Pio
you.
for being up this early for this conversation. Nice as
It's
well.
Oh, yes.
11:30.
Thank you.
It's
Oh, what time is it?
11:30.
Oh, it's 11:30
11:30.
already. Okay, I
Yeah.
thought
Oh,
it's
wow.
still early.
Lunchtime.
Lunchtime.
Lunch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Thanks again, Nice. That
Yeah,
was
thank you, nice.
mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
It was my pleasure.
Sayang we didn't get an Isola cameo.
Oh, yeah. Actually.
Yeah, we
Ano
can.
lang, behind the
can.
scenes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you just wait for a while and then until maybe we can end this? We're ending the conversation with again, just to remind everyone, the exhibition can be viewed. You can visit the Ateneo Art Gallery. We're open from Mondays to Saturdays. Just book a visit with us. This is mainly to enter the gate 3. You can book your visit even while at the before entering gate 3. So it's easier now. And then we do have other exhibitions that you can visit, including Leroy New's outdoor installation, Mebuyan's Colony. So again, thank you and have a pleasant weekend. Ay, hindi pa pala. Sorry. Have a good day. Sorry.